Welcome to our immigration debate. I'm Casey from the Political Science Club. I'll be your moderator this evening, and I just want to give everybody a chance to plug their organization really quick before we start. The Political Science Club meets on Wednesdays in Ruby Jones, and you can find more information for us on our Facebook page.
I'm Mary, and this is Alicia. I work in the College Republicans, and we meet Mondays at 7:30 in Ruby Jones.
I'm Victoria, and this is Kat. We're from the College Democrats. We meet as well on Mondays at 7:30.
Ruby Jones.
Ruby Jones.
202.
I'm Tom, and this is Chris, and we are from Students for Liberty. We meet Mondays at 6 p.m. in Ruby Jones 104.
All right, and we're going to open up with some opening statements. Republicans, if you'd like to go first.
We live in a great country that promotes freedom. However, laws are necessary to ensure that those freedoms that are entitled to us by citizenship are preserved. Many people come to this country in hopes of a better life, and it is pertinent that they do so the legal way. If an illegal act is committed, it is important that the laws are enacted and the Constitution is upheld. If certain policies lead to certain outcomes for individuals who do not follow the standard protocol for entering this country, it is necessary that the laws be upheld. The current economy in the United States is not anywhere near where it is hoped to be. Many people feel that illegal aliens come to America and cause disturbance to the system. Two possible reasons are by taking jobs away from citizens and by using public goods and services they do not pay in tip. Two major terms often associated with immigration are amnesty and deportation. Amnesty is not the answer. By providing amnesty, the meaning of citizenship is undermined, and it would carry an emblem that if you do something illegal, you will be awarded with citizenry. Deportation should be an option, as they already committed something illegal in their way of coming here, but without reasonable cause, they cannot be stopped by law enforcement. If they commit acts that cause law enforcement officials to find them to be suspect, it is a reasonable option for law enforcement officials to detain them for deportation. It should not be a problem for individuals to be asked to present valid proof of U.S. citizenship.
Okay, I'm Kat from the College Democrats, and our initiative is in amending the current system to create one that is more efficient for all. One of our biggest incentives is towards citizenship and doing things like reducing the amount of time that it takes to achieve citizenship or getting a green card or visa, reducing barriers for those who are seeking to become entrepreneurs, innovators, scientists, etc., and bringing more highly skilled workers into the country, as well as those who fit into the unskilled labor market. We are looking to streamline the process because the current system, as many of you know, takes several years to get past, both in paperwork, citizenship tests, and a lot of that is wait time. You know, it's not in the actual process. It's just waiting in line. So another issue that we're looking to address is the deportation for illegal immigrants. We are looking to reform that so that immigrants in good standing have higher priority in the immigration process, and those who would be deported are ones who would be deemed criminal by U.S. laws or who pose national security threats. We also would provide a plan for those who are already in the country and making them priority for gaining citizenship over those who are not currently in the country. Another one of our goals is to keep families together, because as many of you know, it's very difficult on families where a naturally born child has parents who are not legal citizens. With deportation, that can break up families. We are also looking to raise country caps and quotas for families and sponsoring immigration for extended families in the future.
As well, we're looking to seek employment benefits for those who are undocumented workers, and with this, we're really trying to focus on corporations and not exploiting people who are undocumented. Through this, we hope to utilize E-Verify more, which is a government-run program that allows companies to cite whether or not their workers are of legal standing and good standing as well. Moreover, we want to strengthen border security as well, improve the border surveillance, not necessarily go too far out whereas we are dehumanizing people, but really just making sure that we are continuing to combat illegal substances and narcotics and improve the relationships with communities that are along the border and increase safety measures for those communities. And lastly, we really want to make sure that illegal immigration is, or immigration in general rather, is improving our economic state. So immigration leads to increased trade, and that's mostly due to small businesses and more consumers. And then less restrictions leads to more tourism, and tourism is a big industry for the United States. And increases in innovation and technological advances are always improving our GDP and gross domestic product. And overall, we're really just looking for a system that gets rid of the bugs and provides for more efficiency, and that we are helping people and providing overall net benefits for the country.
All right, thanks. SFL?
Okay, again, I'm Tom Mandrake, President of Students for Liberty. This is my partner, Chris Monco, President-elect for next semester. So we're gonna make our job fun tonight by taking a very extreme position. We will be arguing in favor of eliminating all immigration quotas as soon as possible so that those that want to work in the United States can do so as soon as possible. This policy is usually called open borders. Now, it's not always a literal meaning of open borders. If you want to have border security for things like human trafficking or drug cartels, you can do so. It also does not mean we believe people should be able to become citizens instantly or vote instantly or collect welfare instantly. We'll get into all of those policies in further detail later in the debate. But basically, the reason we want to eliminate immigration quotas is because we believe that if you are a human being born on this earth, you should have the right to move freely on this earth. So the United States is currently known as the bastion of freedom, as it were, the most immigrant-friendly country in the world. We let in 675,000 immigrants per year, but as a percentage of population, we actually rank 22nd on the list of most immigrant-friendly countries, which actually puts us under some much more highly or densely populated countries as well, such as Japan and the UK. For a highly skilled person, like a professor from another country or a scientist, it's pretty easy to come to this country. For people that are not highly skilled, it's very, very, very difficult. Waiting lists that could be anywhere from 10 to 24 years, depending on where you're coming from. Immigration restrictions deny very basic human rights, like the right to move freely about the earth, the right to take a job from a willing employer, the right to rent from a willing landlord, and most importantly, the right to make your own life better and the life of your family better, otherwise known as that pursuit of happiness. Now, we acknowledge that if letting in all these immigrants would create an absolute disaster, then we could see why people would want to restrict immigration. So, opponents of immigration have to prove that the results would be disastrous. That's the only justification to deny people these very basic rights. Once they do that, they have to show that there are no cheaper and more humane alternatives other than keeping them out completely. Many opponents of immigration will argue that immigrants steal our jobs, decline our wages, ruin our culture, and a bunch of other negatives. Aside from showing that many of these accusations simply are not true, we will also demonstrate that there are many policy alternatives other than shutting them out completely. Believe it or not, open borders will actually have tremendous economic benefits on the world as a whole. Several studies show that open borders would literally double the GDP of the globe. Literally double the GDP of the globe. What does that mean in real people terms? Your standard of living is very, very likely to rise. So when it comes down to it, why should we even be concerned about the well-being of the rest of the world? Why should we not just leave the quotas the way they are, leave things the way they are? Because not only will free movement of human beings bring great benefits to the world as a whole, but we as Americans believe that all people are created equally and should be treated equally. We should not deny people the right to improve their lives through immigration quotas or requirements. Thank you.
Okay. Our first question tonight is, how do you feel about the current system? What's working, what isn't, and what should be changed? Should we go in reverse order just for fun?
I think that the current system is completely unjust, it's anti-human, and it's anti-free markets. An open border, as we've said, improves the market, it'll increase the GDP greatly. But just as a libertarian myself, the key to a libertarian philosophy is we reject any and all initiations of force against free, beautiful, and independent human beings, such as yourself or those who wish to come across the border. So basically, our current system initiates force against those who wish to come across the border and make a better life for themselves, and we completely reject that notion.
Yeah, exactly. And like we said, the only thing we really like about it is that at least it lets in that 675,000. Other than that, we don't really like very much about it. Yeah, that's basically it.
We like the current system, but we feel that it can be greatly improved. We think that it has a good base structure, but there's a lot of kinks in the system, so to say. So therefore, we can speed up the process, and a lot of these points we addressed in our opening statement. Speed up the process, create more possibilities for the individuals coming here, and as well make sure it's benefiting everybody in an economic sense, because that increases our standard of living. As we said, we don't necessarily agree with opening the borders completely or closing the borders completely. We see that there is immense opportunity to amend it in other aspects.
And another thing about that is kind of readjusting the quota system, not necessarily doing away with it entirely, but obviously we have some countries that are that have greater numbers as far as people immigrating to the U.S. And we have some countries who don't have that same number. So the number should not be the same for every country. And so by doing that, we would be reducing the number of illegal immigrants living in the country. And by speeding up the citizenship process, you're allowing yourself to have more people paying taxes, more people contributing to the economy. It just economically benefits everybody.
While the process does seem to have some issues with it, it does rather work pretty well. The process to become a citizen, while it may be hard, actually means that someone actually knows what they're doing and they know that they actually want to become a citizen of America. So while we're sitting here looking at this, we gotta think that if they want to come here, they're gonna do what they can to come here. So why can't they do it the legal way to start with? There are a lot of issues that do face us, and one of them is that it does take so long, and that's why so many people have just come here without going through the process. So if we could speed it up, it would probably help us out a lot with the legal immigration that is available in America. However, the real issue is what do we do when they are here? Is there a way to help them either become citizens or to have them go back out of our country and try again the legal way?
Okay. Our next question is about the specific policy changes that everybody would like to see to our current system. What would be a better policy to replace that, or what changes need to be made, and how would we go about implementing that specifically? Let's start with Democrats.
Not to rehash what was already said by our positioning, we feel that speeding up the process, creating a pathway to citizenship, which includes several factors such as admitting wrongdoing, what were the other factors?
So you need to admit that you've committed a crime, pay a fee, essentially, begin paying taxes, be literate, and take a citizenship test in order to gain that pathway.
This was under the Obama administration, so really making sure that that process is being implemented in order to help the status quo with people who are already here, rather than deporting them and then bringing them back, because that kind of seems like a backwards plan. It's a lot of money and it's not efficient in that process. We really want to make sure we are helping those who are here.
Okay, Republicans?
Well, one of the things is that it should be a faster process, but they should still take the exam that's been in place for many years now. Also, one of the things that you could do is make the exam more cost effective, which is probably why a lot of people don't take it. Roughly, it's about $700 currently, and that's a lot of money to become a citizen. And they need to have certain things that they can prove that they can do to become a citizen. They should be able to show that they can hold a job and that they can work in the United States and support themselves and their families that they most likely are going to bring with them. So if they can show that they can do that and maybe have like a voucher system that works, that they can actually take the test and set up a way to make it work.
Okay, so I'm going to start with a little thought experiment. Imagine that you live in Haiti. Imagine your family was in Haiti. Exactly, he said God now. There's a good reason for that. It's one of the poorest, most awful countries on the face of the earth. The United States is right nearby. Now, a 10-year wait might not seem that bad if you are a middle-class person in a different country. To somebody in Haiti who is just struggling to find food and clean water, 10 years is far too long. That's why we have a lot of people from Mexico risking a lot to hop over the border illegally. First thing we would do is get rid of those quotas. Make the process very easy. All we ask is that you register with the United States government just so they know you're in the country. The people that are already here illegally, we would grant pretty immediate amnesty to because they broke laws that were unjust in the first place. I wouldn't look down upon them. I think they did something that any of us would do if we were in their situation, which is try to make their family's life better.
Yeah, I mean, just to add on, I don't think that there should be any quotas. I don't think anyone should have to pay any fines. And as a business owner, I don't care if my employee knows who George Washington is or not. I care that he produces a certain amount of goods for me and makes the economy better for everybody.
I would like to add, how many native-born Americans do you think could actually pass those citizenship tests? Probably below 50%. Even one of the English tests, imagine how few Americans could actually pass one of those reasonably. I don't think any of those are reasonable, and of course the $700 fee that the Republicans talked about is ridiculous as well. I don't want the federal government wasting any more money than they already do.
And George Washington wasn't the first president of the United States.
Thank you, Father.
The president under the
If
Articles
we
of
could keep it
Confederation
to
was.
the panel.
So we've talked a lot about how we would deal with immigrants coming into the country. What is your position on people who are already in the country, and in what cases should they be deported? What should be done with them or to them, or in retrospect, that was a poor choice of phrasing. Republicans is going to take away.
I think amnesty encourages more illegal immigration because if immigrants know that if they can come here illegally and just be granted citizenship, they're going to do it. And I don't think we should reward illegal actions. We can't go around looking and targeting people to see if they're illegal immigrants, but if something happens where we can ask someone for ID and information, we should be able to do that. I don't think illegal immigrants should stay here if they don't want to follow the rules.
Well, in respect to this, we agree slightly with that point on the fact that amnesty to all might encourage that. You can also, if you want to provide a plan that's not going to incentivize that, you can grandfather clause it. Not to say that we're going to do that, but that is solvency to that issue. But furthermore, on the issue of deporting people, it would cost the U.S. government $1.5 trillion to deport all 12 million immigrants.
12,500 per immigrant.
Yes.
What would the cost be if we just executed them?
That's-
Please keep it to the panel.
We're not in favor of that plan. That's not necessarily from me. So, yeah, we're good.
Another thing, one second. It's very important to our position is keeping families together, and deportation, especially in recent months, as we've seen, has done a lot to break up families in this country. And one of our few instances in which we do believe that deportation is the right thing to do is in cases of criminal action. If you've come to this country and you've committed a federal, state, local crime, then that is an instance in which deportation is the most viable option.
Well, I think to say what makes it criminal is very vague because there are many unjust laws that exist in the system. For instance, an immigrant that comes across with a bag of marijuana, I'm not too concerned about. But, we talk about, finding out who these people are by paper checks, and I just remember seeing in old film reels that were narrated in German where a lot of men had red patches on their arms where they were asking for documentation checks. But other than that, as I said, as a libertarian, we reject the initiation of force, and deportation is a direct, forceful action against peaceful people who are crossing an arbitrary line to better their lives.
Yeah, I mean, to deport all undocumented workers that have committed a crime, technically we'd have to deport all of them, because they're all technically illegal immigrants. But to say that amnesty would encourage more illegal immigrants, well, under our system, there wouldn't be really any illegal immigrants because we could remove all quotas. There'd be no need to come over illegally. Secondly, that has the assumption that being an illegal immigrant is automatically a bad thing. Like we said, we believe the laws are completely unjust, and if we were in their position, we'd probably do the same thing. If we're living in a terrible situation and we see the United States, which has plenty of opportunity for us, we'd kind of be dumb not to cross over the border illegally.
Is that allowed or?
Audience questions? Who has a specific
Given
question?
just in general, given the fact that most illegal immigrants who are here because they're on an expired visa, what would your response be to those specific situations? I'm not talking about crossing borders illegally. They didn't really commit a crime. What would your response be to that?
I think
You want to start? Democrats?
I think our response to that would be extending the visa. I know that requires a lot of processes and that it is already expired, but in the process of gaining citizenship, what we have to realize is that it is a process. So first needs to come a visa so that they can go through the process of obtaining full citizenship.
And expediting that in general,
And,
making it faster, and not necessarily incurring a penalty as a result of an expired visa.
Okay, SFL looks like they're chomping at the
Yeah,
bit.
well, I would say that, for instance, let's say I'm an employer, your government, and Tom here is an employee who wants to work for me. Why do I need your permission to hire him? I'm not holding a gun to his head and making him work. He's willfully wanting to work for me, and I willfully want to hire him.
Yeah, we really don't buy into the notion of like businesses exploiting these undocumented workers. The workers clearly came here for a reason, and the employers are hiring them willingly, and the people are working willingly. They're making their lives substantially better. They're raising their income several-fold, not just doubling it or tripling it. It could be as much as 10 to 20 times depending on where you're coming from. It's a 1,000 to 2,000% increase in income very quickly.
Can I ask SFL a question response?
Can we get Republicans first and then we'll...
Well, if you come here on a visa, you know that you are not an American citizen in the country. So there are restrictions that do apply to your visa, and you should know them before you actually decide to go through with them. So you should know ahead of time if you decide you wish to stay here to start those processes. And we should make it more important that those who wish to stay start looking at those processes before they actually do have an expired visa. Should be taken care of beforehand.
You were going to say?
So if there was no minimum wage laws in place, would employers pay fair wages?
Yes.
Yeah, probably. It depends what you mean by fair.
Okay, something around.
If you mean fair by that somebody would work for that wage and the employer would hire them for that wage, then yeah, absolutely. As we know, many of us start low wage jobs above the minimum wage. I started my first job at Chick-fil-A, I think at $8.25. I work here as a tutor at $9.25. So it's not definite that we'd all be working for $1 an hour without a minimum wage.
The thing with this process is that companies have the ability to expose people who are undocumented, so it's basically like holding something against them. They can say, I'm going to pay you $4 instead of the standard $7.25, because otherwise, if you don't comply with this, you're first of all not going to find another job easily, but I can report you to the government and you can be deported back.
Mm-hmm. All the more reason to grant instant amnesty.
Okay, before we get mired down in minimum wage, who has an immigration-related question?
You guys mentioned that you don't think people should be deported automatically for committing a crime. How do you feel about violent crimes?
Well, violent crimes are a separate thing, but in all crime, really, I'm someone who believes very heavily in common law. And under common law, you have to prove that there is a victim and prove the person's guilt before there is a crime. So, you know, there would be a process, and I'm all for exiling and keeping out of society the murderers or child rapists, people who sexually abuse people. But as I said, you know, drug users or nonviolent offenders, I have no issue with.
Republicans, do you comment? Democrats, anybody?
I agree with maybe deporting violent criminals, and I don't necessarily agree with the SFL's positioning on how they determine who is a violent criminal, but we agree with deporting criminals.
All right, another question in the back?
In terms of deportation of the illegal immigrants, how would you go about identifying them and deporting them? Would you be in favor of immigration checkpoints, or what tactics do you think would be reasonable to deport
Well, like,
hundreds of thousands?
if there's reasonable cause for like a law enforcement officer to pull them over, the law enforcement officer should have the right to ask for papers and all that stuff. If they can't prove that they actually belong here after a reasonable cause, then there should be a right to put, like, there are detention centers available to use for this type of issue, and go through a process to see if deportation is the right answer.
But what requirements, what standards would they use? Like, what type of authority would you give to a law enforcement officer to be able to pull something
If the
over?
person that they're pulling over is not doing something that's a law that is for law-abiding citizens of America, then why are they subject to not being, like, restricted to our laws?
But what is reasonable cause?
That doesn't
That's
make
what I
sense. You
mean.
can't pull somebody over for generally a speeding ticket and be like, wow, I don't think you're a legal citizen. It just doesn't make sense.
Reasonable cause
What
is
a reasonable
more-
cause are they going to show that they are an illegal citizen? There's no way to prove that. That's
You don't have a
discrimination.
driver's license.
Yeah, you don't have a driver's license, so if
You
you're pulling
generally,
over in
if
a
you're
You
car-
can't usually tell if you have a driver's license if you're,
If
just
you-
driving past somebody.
Exactly.
I would
Or if
also.
you get pulled over
Speeding,
like
if they
for
put someone-
intoxication, you have to show.
But the car actually has to be stopped for that to happen.
Well, I'm not sure a lot of people know about this, but they're very unconstitutional and anti-human border checkpoints that are set up all over the country within 200 miles of the border, where Border Patrol essentially sets up and you pull up and they say, papers please, and if you don't have your papers, then you violently get kidnapped and thrown out of the country.
I would also question what type of people you'd be checking for papers.
Okay.
Ask everyone for a driver's license, we'd ask everyone for a driver's license.
But it would have to be
But that's a
everybody.
different crime.
Alright, have you ever been pulled over, did you ever get asked for your driver's license?
That's a different crime of not having your driver's license on you. That falls under different
So more
statutes.
the proof that you actually supposed to memorize your driver's license.
All right, another audience question? Chris?
I believe in the last 2 or 3 weeks, Mayor Nutter signed legislation to end ICE holds in Philadelphia. ICE holds keep people, they allow the Philadelphia police to imprison somebody who is kind of similar to the Arizona laws, where people can be held indefinitely, or at least up to 48 hours where they'll check their immigration status. Philadelphia just did away with that, but do you think that's a strategy that people should be going forward with?
Okay, who'd like to take this one?
We're obviously opposed to ICE.
Democrats, Republicans, anything to add?
We're not really too familiar on the terms that go along with ICE holds.
Yeah, I think you brought that up when we were at the political science club meeting, but it's not fair to just assume someone is an illegal immigrant. You can't target them and judge it on the way they look. It has nothing to do with that. Not all
You
legal
know it
immigrants-
can't be English.
Not all legal immigrants are from one country, and if there is a reason to approach someone, you should be able to approach them, and if they can't prove that they're a citizen, then that's how you.
How would you determine that without, like, profiling them?
Because you're approaching them when they're breaking the law or doing something that law-abiding citizens don't do.
Law-abiding citizens break the law, or legal citizens break the law all the time. That's the thing.
And they get arrested.
But our
But you
papers don't
don't,
get
you don't
checked.
ask their citizenship.
I guarantee my citizenship will not get checked ever. Even during
Question, okay, Democrats, you're acting like IDs don't exist at all. Like when they check your ID, it shows right there, citizenship.
We agree that our IDs are checked, but we don't agree that we are pulling out our birth certificates or
You don't need
citizenship
to, an
papers.
ID shows that.
The thing is,
You need a
you're,
birth
the
certificate.
We get to get an ID or that's not it.
thing is, there are many ways that an ID can be obtained. The process by which you're stating that we are going to find illegal citizens or undocumented workers, it doesn't necessarily make sense. You can't just be like, wow, I'm gonna pull you over for a speeding ticket.
No, we're
and
talking
then
about crimes though.
crimes? Okay, so
Yeah.
if you're going through the whole process of a trial or actually being put into a cell, you are probably going to see that. But the real reason why you're there is because you committed a crime, not because you are undocumented. If that
But they can
makes
still
sense.
pull that against you. It's not like they can't use that at all.
It's an additional term, I agree.
Well,
Republicans to comment on that.
I think she said it for us.
I would just like to point out, and I shouldn't have to tell this to college students, it's probably a bad idea. It's very easy to obtain IDs that are not real. It's very easy. A lot of my friends have them. Shouldn't say that on camera.
Okay, we had a question back there for a while.
Yeah, some Republicans. I just wanted to know, like, why do you guys think it's fair that a particular group can be moved out of what's supposed to be a free country, and for the simple fact that they came from somewhere else, when everyone in this room probably has an ancestor that came from somewhere else originally?
They didn't come here legally. It's not that they can't stay. They need to go
The
through a
only thing that
process
changed,
that
sorry.
makes them legal to be here.
But the only thing that changed since everyone else migrated here was that someone decided, well, now this is mine because this is the piece of earth that I was on, and I should make these rules up, and certain people aren't allowed in.
You should join our club.
I can't
Tom, if you're done recruiting, she's
Sorry.
Immigration is a great thing. That's how this country started, and that's how it grew. And we're not saying that we're
not
against
against
it at all.
immigration. We're
But
saying,
we're
can you do it
against
the legal way?
illegal immigration.
But why do they have to leave if they didn't come here legally? I don't understand
If
why.
they're not willing to go through a process to become legal, then why are they allowed to stay? It's not that they have to leave, it's that they can't go through the process because they're just not willing to, then they should go back with.
Thousands of years ago, no one had
I think we had another
Well,
comment on that.
I would just like to add on to this about ancestry. I don't think that when the early American ancestors were slaughtering Native Americans for their land, that they were filling out paperwork and going through the process.
Well, that was a different time back then, and I'm part Native American, and I can understand that. But times have changed, and we have laws, and people claim land. And
Do you think that there's a reason why they can't do this process legally? Like, do you think that everybody's like, wow, I just don't want to be a legal citizen? Maybe there's a problem with the system of becoming legal.
I can understand that because it is very expensive. That could be one of the reasons. But that's where the reform should be taken. It shouldn't be taken at, like, let's change the system completely. But you can't just wipe the system away either.
Maybe make it more efficient?
I stated that at some point earlier.
Okay.
Well, again, I would just like to say that if you're somebody that is living in parts of Latin America or Mexico or Bangladesh or Haiti or the Congo, even a year is a little bit too long for you. You are going to do everything in your power to try to make your life better.
Who was the guy that they just found a kid who tried to sneak in here? He was holding onto the wheel well of an airplane.
No, he ran away from home.
Oh, he was running away from same.
They would do the same thing.
No, you said you were.
What we're saying is that these immigration laws, it's not just a matter of, let's tweak the system. I like the Democrats' idea in the sense that you want to, raise those quotas and whatnot. But it's not a matter of just, tweaking the system a bit to make it, 4 years instead of 10 or something like that. Like these people, it's also a fountain of potential too. We don't think about that. You mentioned like economically advantageous people coming into the country, like foreign professors, scientists, doctors. Imagine all the people that have grown up in impoverished nations that don't even have the opportunity for that would have that opportunity here. We could be keeping the cure of cancer in a different country, or the next great movie star, or next great doctor. We don't know, because we're keeping them in a country where they have zero potential.
Why does your profession actually have to deal with why you're trying to move? That shouldn't be a part that is into the system of how you actually get citizenry or get to come here.
The thing is, if you have entirely open borders, the fact of the matter is that a great number of immigrants to this country are unskilled laborers. And not that that is a bad thing, but economically speaking, especially in a time where we are trying to raise the minimum wage, you
Higher
need
sector jobs.
Yes, higher sector jobs are of greater prevalence to our society, and not that we don't also need unskilled workers, but there needs to be a balance, and without a quota system, you can't control that.
We don't want an influx of the lower sectors because we also need to make sure the higher sector is improving. So therefore, there has to be some controls over this process. Like, what's the feasibility in your plan? Like, how is this possible? How is this going to do anything that's beneficial? I understand that it's beneficial to the individuals, but maybe not in the long term, because the standard of living might not increase because there's an unemployment rate in that sector.
Well, I mean, any points if you want to start.
Think about all the unemployment that's been created and how many low-skilled manufacturing jobs have been shipped overseas because of over-regulation, the continuous raising of the minimum wage, which is only a scapegoat because there's no sound money anymore. Once you remove these barriers, you could hire the whole country.
The thing is, we're moving towards high
Folks,
sector.
as much as this is a very interesting line of discussion, we have some questions from the
They
audience.
gave me so much to respond
Let
to.
him go.
I feel like I should get like at least 3 minutes on that.
All right, I'm timing you. You have
I mean,
3 minutes.
almost every economic model suggests that global GDP would double with open immigration. Secondly, low-skilled labor of immigrants is actually so low-skilled that they wouldn't even compete with many low-skill Americans, because they have skills that even low-skill Americans don't have, like speaking English, which is a very important skill. They would actually open up a whole new sector of jobs we don't have, like household maids, servants, for example. Even the most ardent opponent of immigration, a fellow named George Borjas, he's an economist at Harvard, estimates that in the long run, there are absolutely no negative effects on U.S. wages from immigration. In the short run, on the lowest skilled Americans, the negative effects on wages are 4%, and that comes from the most ardent opponent of immigration. Proponents of immigration suggest that the negative effects are even less than that. So the wages argument does not hold up, the unemployment argument does not hold up.
Are we allowed to have a rebuttal to that? Just quickly.
Really, really quick, I promise.
As
Okay,
long as we
I
get
feel
one
like
too.
I feel like what you're saying is only feasible if every country in the world opened their borders.
You're not looking at it, you're looking at it from a global standpoint. Your data, and we did research on your data, is not US exclusive. All the benefits that SFL is providing is if every single country in this world was to open borders. It's not possible. Our GDP is not doubling if just the US is increasing borders.
So global scale.
You're
And
right.
also, we do agree with you that it won't take US jobs. The thing is, it might not be taking US jobs, but they might be competing with each other.
Again, you're right about that. I was using global numbers. It would increase global GDP by 30 to 50% if it was only the U.S. 30 to 50
I looked
only.
at that study by Clemens and Kaplan, and it was globally.
Yeah, the global is doubling.
No, but it
everybody
was
does.
every country's.
Okay, either way, it would increase
Details,
our
details.
GDP. We know
Let's
that.
grab a question from Christian.
They're
Okay.
important details.
I'm going to take more because I've been in between the Democrats and SFL. My issue is more, and I don't want to divulge into theory because I don't believe one bit of your minimum wage theories, obviously. I agree that we should let them in, and jobs probably won't be stolen, as you say. So my issue comes after the fact that everybody's in. It seems like you're okay, and those maid services are more gray market area jobs where they're not really legal, but they are kind of legal in the sense that they happen, and it's more. I'm not going to get into the economics of gray markets, but when it's okay, and I am more inclined to believe open borders is a better solution. But my issue is, it seems like you're trying to make a lower level of citizenry, or non-citizenry in this case, in the sense that you guys are now the lowest sector, and we've decided that based on almost like a national identity, and that's my issue. My question is, are you, being your libertarian mindset, again, every libertarian's different, I'm not saying bunching you all together, I just know you two from past debates a little bit better, but what are you going to do to provide for these new amounts of people? Are you going to provide any sort of public assistance, which I know you are more adamantly against, any sort of schooling, or because it's going to be flooded regardless? And I'm not saying that them coming here is bad. I'm saying we need to provide, and is that the state's responsibility? What happens, or do we just not care afterwards?
Well, I would say that I don't necessarily agree we would be creating like a second-class citizenry, but right now it's even worse than that. Because what we're creating is two separate worlds. We're creating the very wealthy U.S. and then trapping out the rest of that impoverished world, which is much worse in our opinion than letting them come in and not providing them, let's say, like welfare checks or things like that. We are in favor of allowing their children to go to public schooling because actually immigrants are a net taxpayer, interesting fact, and they would actually pay much more in taxes if they were documented as legal if we granted them amnesty. So we don't really believe that they would be a welfare drain like a lot of opponents of
I wasn't implying that.
Yeah, that's fine. But yeah, like I think if you went up to somebody from like Bangladesh, let's say, and say, we would let you into our country, but we're not going to give you a bunch of free stuff. Do you think they'd say, oh, I don't want to go then? They'd say, I'd still go. I'll go without any of your welfare. I'll go without anything. I will just go and take a job that pays me, you know, $7 an hour U.S. currency, and their life will be substantially better than it is in Bangladesh.
I mean, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying that.
We agree that they would. We do agree that immigrants pay into taxes, mostly indirectly as of now, but if they were documented citizens, they would pay more. Under the public assistance program, we don't feel that open borders is conclusive to providing public assistance programs because it doesn't necessarily make sense on how you're documenting who's here, who's not here. It's the distribution, just the process of that just isn't there. And we feel that public assistance for immigrants is good, especially in education, because you have to have an educated electorate or public to benefit in society.
You say that it's inhumane that people can't move freely on this earth. That sounds like more of a UN issue rather than an American issue.
Sounds like a human issue.
Yeah, I mean, we can control what happens in the U.S. I mean,
We can control what's in the U.S. We can't control globally. We can't control what's in every other country. So where you're willing to let everyone come here, what about people who want to go freely to other countries? Like, why are we the only country that can take them in and make everyone free?
well, I mean, we're saying that ideally every country should adopt this policy, but since we're only Americans in the U.S., we're saying the U.S. should do it. We should take the lead in a policy that would be greatly beneficial to the entire world.
Do we have enough resources to handle that amount of people?
Absolutely. I'll give you an example. Hong Kong has literally no natural resources, and they're one of the wealthiest places on the face of the earth. Thanks to immigration and free trade.
Do we have questions?
In regards to the undocumented people that are here now, there's a huge population of them are our age. They're trying to go to college. So in regards to that, how do you feel about the like I Have a Dream Act?
Especially, well, I'm not sure how this falls under the DREAM Act in particular, but Kat has a number she wants to bring up as well. But if you come here and go to one of our institutions, like say you're going to an Ivy League school, or even any school for that matter, we want you to stay here afterwards. And that's something that we have to work on, is extending student visas so that they can stay here afterwards. They don't come here, become educated, and then go back to their own country with new innovative ideas, new businesses, etc. We want that industry to stay here.
Yeah, the provisions of the DREAM Act, a study was done that showed that were it put in place between 2011 and 2020, it would influx of $1.4 billion into the economy just through the DREAM Act alone. So it's just you're yes, both in it's economically beneficial. You're educating people. you're putting people into service. It's also for the military, so there's that provision as well. So yeah, that's it. It's absolutely the beneficial program for
Republicans, that's the name?
Well, most of the ones that are coming here do have student visas, and that's how they're able to attend most of the universities. So one of the things that we were thinking is more instead of immigration reform as a whole and reforming the actual process, visa reform is where it really needs to start, because that is one of the issues we're facing, is that a lot of people do come here for education and go back to wherever they came from and build up that economy instead of the economy they formed in.
That sounds like a point of agreement. Does that set that up?
Just say that you don't, I think the DREAM Act is something that helps a lot of immigrants, get to the universities, but I don't think it's the government's, you don't need government's permission to attend a college if you want to. I think that it should be between the college and the individual choosing to go to the institution.
Then why do we have government funded schools?
Well, that's a whole nother topic.
Okay. We have questions over here for a while.
Okay, 2 questions for Democrats. One, earlier you said, obviously something's going on with the whole citizenship, that's why people are just coming over here illegally. If you're not a citizen, you don't have to pay income tax. That's a huge issue. I mean, that's a big amount of money that would be missing from these illegals. Second point, are you just going to keep extending visas for students? They're just never going to become citizens? Or?
I don't believe that you're able to apply for citizenship under a student visa. I might be wrong on that term.
You can, it starts out as, there's different tiers as far as visas are concerned. A student visa is concerned, I think it's like a tier 4, and a tier 1 is like the highest level that you can be, which is, people, skilled laborers, and then there are others that fall underneath that. And you move from tier to tier based on what it is that you're doing in the country. And from that, you can attain you can attain permanent residence, green card, and then citizenship. And so what we're suggesting is not necessarily just continuing to give visas or extending them, but by shortening the process by which you can become a citizen, you are more readily available. You're making tax dollars more readily available. The more people that are actually citizens, the more tax dollars that you're getting.
We want to make it accessible. And I'm sorry, I forgot your first question.
You said that there was an issue with citizenship, that it was obviously too hard for them to do, and there was a reason that they were choosing to skip out in the process. And I'm saying yes, because they don't have to pay taxes.
That's not necessarily.
It's not the only reason.
That's not the only reason. They do pay taxes indirectly. Like you pay a sales tax, you indirectly pay a rent tax.
But how much is that? You spend.
You're right.
Depends where you live.
Okay.
Compared to income tax?
40% of U.S. citizens do not qualify to pay income tax. That is not an immigrant issue.
I'm sorry, are you part of this debate?
No, but I just need to say what you want.
Back to the panel.
Students for Liberty.
If I just may add to the end of that, I'd actually like to reverse similar, or what you said, in that I think Americans, like immigrants, should pay no income tax.
We're libertarian. We don't like income tax. But I mean, like we said.
We agree with that.
Like we said, even the undocumented immigrants in this country, from the best of our knowledge, are still net taxpayers. Mainly because they're not eligible for any government benefits either. And if they were allowed to become citizens and pay taxes through the common system, then they would pay even more taxes, as the Democrats mentioned as well.
All right, Republicans, do you have a comment related to income tax or citizenship test?
Well, we don't really want to pay taxes either, but
Nobody does.
but we do. But they do provide certain things. However, they're not fully necessary. One of the ways that you can increase spending in the states is by lowering taxes. Proven that kind of helps. If you decrease taxes, then investment will rise, and when investment rises, consumption rises. So it allows for a different circulation of money besides just taxing people and
Okay. There's been questions out here for a while. Danny?
In terms of immigrants taking opportunities away from Americans and going to universities and things of that nature, do you support affirmative action programs that give immigrants a leg up in getting into universities, or minorities in general?
Republicans want to take that
Do you
one?
support government interfering in that nature?
No, I think hard work should be rewarded. I don't think that the way a person looks determines diversity. You can have two people that are both the same race, and there can be many differences between them. And I do think it's unfair that sometimes people are accepted over others with a lower score just because of where they come from or what they look like.
Democrats?
We do not stand with that with affirmative action, because the Obama administration is beginning to reform certain affirmative action plans within universities and businesses, etc. So we stand with the president.
Well, I would say we just said that you don't want to give somebody a leg up just because of who they are or where they came from, then why on earth would we shut out the rest of the world just because they weren't born in the United States?
I have a question when it comes to wages and labor. Under a free market, in the free market, you know, the wages depend on the supply of labor in the market. So when you open up the borders, don't you bring in a huge influx of unskilled workers? And wouldn't that bring in, because of the great supply of workers now, you're bringing down wages tremendously. And in fact, if you have completely open borders, wouldn't bring it down like
So
pretty bad.
the way you fix that is you don't have to worry about minimum wages when you fix the money. For instance, in 1964, when money still had silver in it, your quarters, things like that, you were paid $1.25 in minimum wage. Today, those same 5 quarters from '64 are worth over $17. So we're being ripped off by an organization known as the Federal Reserve. So if you fix that problem, you don't have to worry about the minimum wage.
Well, I would say in more direct response to your question, that there's actually been a lot of research on this, and if there was only one type of labor, or even just one type of unskilled labor, you'd be absolutely right. Everyone, including unskilled Americans, would make pittance of what they do now. But the unskilled labor that would be coming in from the rest of the world lacks very, very basic skills that even unskilled Americans have, such as reading and writing, speaking English, things of that nature. Just knowing the culture as well is a skill. So, like I said, even the most ardent opponents of immigration have calculated that the worst effect on unskilled workers in the United States would be a 4% wage effect.
But you're still bringing hundreds of millions of people who do have some skills. You know, even if they're not as good as Americans, you know, I'm sure you can find enough that will have the skills that Americans do, unskilled Americans do.
How are you going to guarantee that they're all going to be working?
What do you?
Well, that's not my thing.
Well, yeah,
I'm not for open borders.
Where does the supply of jobs come from? It comes from
Currently
this.
don't have enough jobs for.
It comes
people
from
who
more
are-
consumers.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have millions more consumers as well, millions of entrepreneurs and such like that. It's the same issue that came in. I'm, of course, not accusing anybody here of being sexist, but in the 1950s they said we shouldn't let women into the labor market because it's going to steal jobs from men, and then all these men will be unemployed. And of course that wasn't true. It was actually a huge net benefit to the economy. It's the same idea.
Alright, do we want to grab a comment from Republicans and Democrats, and then we've got lots of questions to get to.
If I may, you know, minimum wage actually drives up business costs and makes it harder for employers to hire employees, because when you raise the cost of labor, we know that businessmen don't dive into their pocket. They take it out of the consumer by either raising prices, or they take it out of their worker by cutting hours or firing people. So, you know, it's something you really have to deal with there.
The issue on that minimum wage topic is that it affects such a low percentage of businesses. If you were to increase the minimum wage, that there's no downside to it. But the other thing is, if you increase minimum wage, you're going to see more consumers spending their money because they're not saving it; they're putting it right back into the economy. But on Musab's actual question about
the prices are going to rise, they're going to have less money.
Yeah,
we're not really talking about it. We're talking about Musab's question. And Musab's question is saying that we're going to see a ton of workers coming over here, and basic economic theories suggest that we are going to see lower wages and actually, not even just lower wages, because if there is a minimum wage and they are documented citizens, then what we're just going to see is higher unemployment rates.
The economic models do not agree with you.
Okay.
Even the most ardent opponents of immigration do not agree with your position on that.
Republicans, a quick comment on more immigrants in jobs in the United States.
I think it's going to take away from jobs because it's going to have more of an influx, and if we're not willing to lower minimum wage even with that, there's going to be, if we raise minimum wage, then more people are going to have less jobs because the employers are not going to be willing to put out so much money into without seeing a profit.
And the state of the economy now, we would not be able to handle that. It's hard getting a job today.
Okay, questions? Over here, I'm sorry.
My name's Jayon. I was gonna say, you said something about if you let them in, then there won't be, where are they gonna find jobs at? And coming from the urban areas, those could really use a lot of help. If they came in, maybe they could work in that area. You can build different jobs there and give them opportunities. And also open up that urban area. There's a lot of them around the world, around the country. You can open up jobs in those areas and build those areas up, which will then in turn build the economy as well.
Question?
Well, they have the answer.
Would anybody like to comment on that?
I definitely agree. I think there is an elasticity point where it's basically where there's a breaking point about how many. I definitely think that more immigrants is a positive thing, but too many might break the system.
Right, and in urban areas, you see a greater number of immigrants than you do in any other area. So, I mean, you know.
There would be a benefit, but there needs to be restrictions on it.
I just
Okay.
we're ignoring market correcting effects. I don't think a bunch of people would move here. Millions would lay unemployed and be like, oh, let's just chill here unemployed. They'd probably move back and move to a different part of the world if that were the case. If it was really this unmitigated disaster, which again, all the studies on this show it would not be. So I don't really see.
Also in that term, like they would go back there and build their economy up, because the only thing they really want to do is work in order to have money and help their family out and those around the neighborhood and things like that. That's another opportunity. It's not like they're just going to come here and this is exactly where they want to be at for the rest of their lives, and they don't want to go.
You just said that they want to go back and build up their economy with, like, practically where they came from. But if they're doing that, why can't they do that from the start?
They don't have
Well, because they don't have the resources. If you're cutting them out of the picture, how are they going to get the resources? The help that they really need.
There are resources in every country, at least that's
Not the same resources.
Not the same resources,
Okay.
but
Well, Chris has a
others.
comment on that.
If I may, you know, if you look at urban areas and look at all the jobs that have left, where does it come from? It's come from high tax rates. And if I can, just as an example really quick, last summer we did something in Philadelphia called Lemonade Freedom Day, where we set up a table and gave out lemonade for free or had suggested donations of 10 cents just to break city code and law and sell lemonade without a permit. We had a guy come up to us who owns a lemonade stand and he said, this is awesome. I can't charge any less than $4 for a cup of lemonade that's full of ice, note you, or mind you, and otherwise I would go out of business. So it just shows like how egregiously high tax rates kill business within urban areas and can't provide jobs for these people.
Yeah, and John is absolutely correct about the going back to your home country thing. We saw this with Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is a beautiful example of open borders. Once the U.S. annexed it, I guess, when was that? Late 1800s, early 1900s. We opened up an open border policy with them. And there's a thing called the diaspora effect, actually, where unless you have people from your home country already in the country you want to go to, the United States in this case, a lot of people actually aren't likely to move there, even if they're poor. You go to places where you have pockets of people that came from your home country in the first place. So I don't even think we would see a massive influx from all over the world. I think Latin America would be the biggest influx we would see. And then after that happens, people come here, the first few brave souls, then more generations come, then they go back to their home country. And they build up that home country with the education they've gained, with the capital they've gained. And Puerto Rico has become like a first world little island there, where it used to be completely third world.
Okay, Republicans, did you want to comment on the original question about immigration to urban areas?
Are we going to lose the concept of an urban area? If you overpopulate too much, is it going to become a city? And then we're going to lose the concept of living in an urban area? I'm from an urban area.
The concept of urban area should be lost. It shouldn't be an urban area.
I'm from an urban area and I like where I live.
The concept of an urban area, I mean, an urban area, I'm talking North Philly type of an urban area. Not wherever you own. So do you think that urban areas should be exactly how they are?
Not all urban areas, but a lot of them are working pretty fine.
Oh.
Democrats don't necessarily have to change everything.
I think he's talking about the city. You're talking
You're
about
talking
city.
about
the hood. Okay, you obviously never been stabbed, never been shot. So I don't think that the world is working properly in those areas.
Guys,
It doesn't look the same.
everybody,
I've been there before.
can we bring it back
It's
in?
different from being there.
I agree that there's definitely room for improvements in cities. I wouldn't necessarily say that you are from the hood, you're from the
No, I
city.
didn't say I was from the
He's talking about reforming the cities, urbanization, right?
Yeah.
But
Which could be
that's a
seen
whole
at
different topic, because you're talking about reforming the city itself, reforming an urban area, not necessarily bringing more people into it. You're talking about reforming what's already there.
Before I had a comment that said if you bring the immigrants in, they could help build up the urban area. I didn't say that.
That seems more like you
So
want to
that's still-
reform the urban area that's already there with immigrants. Why can't it reform as it is? You want to bring more people in to reform it.
I'm sorry, there's
All right.
a lot of discrimination.
This seems like it's an issue we're a bit deadlocked on. Can we grab other questions from?
We had generations of migratory work along the southern border of the country. And, I mean, after 9/11, there's a lot of national security issues with that. But for generations, people were going back and forth and working migratory jobs and going back and leading their lives, in Mexico. Do you think that that's like, instead of a full closed border, is that, an option that you think would be feasible?
Why not? It shouldn't matter where you live if you want to work for me, as long as you can get to work on time.
We do have workers from other countries, people like in Canada, people from Canada drive across the border every day and drive home every night.
And what are they doing? They're helping to build the economy because they're working over
Actually,
there.
the money they take back builds their GDP, not our GDP.
Yeah, so if we have Canadians doing that, why not the people from Latin America? Why not the rest of the world? Why don't we have that open immigration?
It improves both GDP because you have one man who's working in, say, a factory and he's taking the product of his labor back to Mexico and spending it there. But then you also have the businessman in the United States who's getting a product made that he's going to sell on the market, and then he's going to spend that money in the United States. So it really helps out both.
It also affects their GNP and it doesn't affect our GNP, which is another issue too.
The Democrats have a comment on that?
Not particularly. We don't really know too much about migrant workers. It seems like an interesting proposal. We just don't have enough details to further comment.
I think that it's like really tough to get a worker visa.
Yeah.
I think that
Because
it's
you have to
harder
have, like,
on that
access.
border because there's so many people trying to come across every day that they cannot quickly go across the border to come to work and go back, so they're never able to
Are
do
you
that.
aware that Canadians, there's just as many they're not just as many, but there are other, Canadians are coming to the country too. There's
I
border
understand
problems
that.
everywhere.
You brought up Latin America.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm saying, if we think it's a good idea with Canadians, then why is it not a good idea with the rest of the world? I don't understand.
I think a valid point was brought up after 9/11. I think a real important issue is how the border since 9/11 has been increasingly being militarized, and I think that's a big issue. And there is unconstitutional border checks. Up until the mid-19th century, I mean, Mexicans traveled freely into California and Texas. Let's be honest, that land used to belong to Mexico up until the mid-19th century. And up until recently, we've really hammered down on our immigration policies, and I think that they're getting to a point where they're borderline unconstitutional. I think that's the issue at hand, and I know that everybody's getting off topic, but I do see the border getting increasingly militarized, and I see that as a big issue going forward. And how do you all feel about that? I guess that's my question.
How is it unconstitutional if they're
To
not
the panel.
citizens? They're not governed by our constitution.
I lost my train of thought, but.
Militarization.
Oh, the militarization. Yeah, I mean, it's not only the border that's being militarized, it's the whole entire nation that's being militarized, and I say demilitarize everything. Why do you need to intimidate all these people who just want to come here and have a better life?
Yeah, exactly. And I think a point that a lot of people forget when they're talking about